Hello and welcome to a new devlog video for Peasant Uprise. I think one of the big reasons behind the success of the Hitman series is the fact that the game opens itself to multiple strategies by offering the player multiple game mechanics. Yet how you complete each mission is still up to you. You could go in guns blazing or complete a level without having to shoot your gun at all. On that spirit, I have been working on what I call game actions. For example, in Hitman, an action could be to pick up a coin or turn the water on or opening a gate with a crowbar. They all involve a few common steps. First, they all involve going to the location where the object is, interacting with that object, which may trigger an action or a sound effect, performing the actual task that may yield a consequence, and finally switching that action off. That consequence could be different in each case, like adding something to your inventory, or when you turn the water on, the consequence is water pouring out. So to break it down, an action at its core has three states: activation, process, and deactivation, where both activation and deactivation can trigger multiple things to happen. But like it seems to be the norm, nothing is as easy as it sounds, and I need more out of this mechanism. I need to keep track of the state of this action. If you turn the water on and exit the game, when you come back in, the player expectation would be that the water is still running. I may also want to tag the execution of this game action to a particular quest, or maybe if the action put a cart in fire, I want to trigger a battle with troops nearby. Maybe some actions will require a particular tool. In the case of Hitman, you need a crowbar in order to open that gate. Or maybe the action is to give someone something, in which case it will need to interact with your inventory. Most of all, I want this to be handled by one script, the game action controller. But really, what it's going to make each action unique is how is this controller configured, as well as what triggers are involved. Now Helen has volunteered to demonstrate. So let's start with the triggers, and I've put together an object with a trigger controller. The trigger controller just grabs all the existing triggers in the object and interacts with them via the iTrigger interface, which declares two rules, on and off. So when Helen enters the object trigger collider, the particle trigger is turned on. When Helen leaves the collider, the particle trigger receives an off command. Almost in the same identical way, we have another example, but this time instead of a particle trigger, it contains an audio trigger, which again will raise an open event upon entering its radius, an off event when leaving. Next, we have an animation trigger attached to this object. The trigger controller can be configured to be something that only gets triggered once, or that it can be triggered every time Helen comes into its collider radius. The cool thing is that these triggers are not exclusive. The trigger controller will loop through all the triggers attached to the object and will turn them on and off, and in this final example, we have all three triggers, but this time in one object. This system set up this way can be very flexible, as each trigger is independent from each other, and as long as they implement the iTrigger interface, they'll be picked up by the controller and will receive those events. The only thing that changes is the implementation behind the on and off methods in those trigger classes. When putting everything together, it can make a lot more sense, and this is the next example, where we have a tree that is blocking the way. If we have an axe, we can chop down the tree and move along. But there are quite a few things going on. The peasant approaches the game action point, kicks off an animation, There are also 2 particle systems happening on the tree, and upon completion the tree will disappear. Now I know that's a bit abrupt, but for demonstration purposes it proves the point and the capabilities that game actions can bring to this game. Now that we are done, we're going to allow Helen to go back to work because we're pretty low on wood supplies. This week, I'm just going to cover one question, so the video doesn't go for too long. The question was regarding the decision to allow the player to carry resources from one level to the next. The concern is that if one collects a good amount of resources in the first level and can bring them along to the second level, this second level will prove to be much easier, and so on to a point where the game would become too easy and therefore boring. The same will apply in the opposite way. If you perform poorly in the first level, then that failure will carry along and would make the game too hard and frustrating. The difference with Peasant Uprise is that time is an important factor, in such a way that if the player spends too much time collecting resources, the troops in the future levels will receive training and reinforcements, in which case future levels would actually be harder, not easier. So in a way, Peasant Uprise carries rogue-like elements as well. It redefines what success is. Gathering a lot of resources but spending 4 days collecting them could hardly be considered a success, because now you'll have to face troops with higher level and even additional soldiers. If you clear the level in 1 day but lose 3 peasants in fights you're not ready to fight, I wouldn't call that a success campaign either. With that said, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next update.